Yes.
Allen?
Yes.
Rose?
Yes.
Thank you. Last item on the agenda is the role of government channel discussion. I know, Nancy, you want to bring this forward.
Yes, I did.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate you.
Bye, Jeremy. Seems that I often have taken on the role on the council of being the question asker. Sometimes I know the answers to the questions when I ask them, and other times I don't. But I think that things need to be asked because citizens have a right to know, and it's by asking questions you get more sunlight in government, and the more sunlight you have in government, to me, the better it is. If it doesn't feel right, then sometimes it's not. So I had some questions, and then I was hoping others would, and we could have maybe just a little discussion about this. I guess I'll start off with asking the question about why did the forum stop after all these years?
All right.
And whoever wants to answer the question, I don't know who they're directed to.
All right. I'll ask Susan to address this.
Most of my questions are for Susan, so you might as well stand there for a while.
I can stand here for a while.
Yeah.
Susan Thomas, Public Information and Policy Advisor for the city. Quickly, Mayor, we might want to consider a new title for this position. There's been several recommended over the last couple of weeks. Wanted to bring those to your attention. Self-appointed cable czar, which I thought was a good option. Public information czar, propaganda minister, minister of enlightenment and propaganda, and then tonight someone thought maybe I should add minister of enlightenment and intellectual enforcement. So that may be a discussion that we want to have down the road.
But none of them mentioned the word conspiracy in there. I'm disappointed.
Well, I'll work on that.
Okay.
I'll get that started. But to address Nancy's first question, Alderman Allen's first question, seriously, after the April 30th forum, the definition of limited public forum became clear to me. Limited public forum is what is allowed in the council-approved policy set for the government channel. And in listening to that forum and in my conversations with Kit, it became apparent to me that what we were doing was outside of the established policy. Some people will argue that I set new policy. Some people might argue that I was outside of my prerogative or jurisdiction, but I think that if you look at what the policy says, it clearly outlines limited public forums. If you listen to the conversation that was on April 30th, what we were doing falls outside of that legal definition as it was presented. So the next day, I had another conversation with the city attorney, and it seemed that we should probably stop breaking policy. So the planning for the two forums were stopped. Those were the only ones I think official planning had started on. That was the high school location and the Walton Arts Center expansion. There are several other forums that have been proposed, requested, but none that had formally started a planning process such as those two.
Okay, I have quite a few here. I'll
go right ahead.
But first, does that answer your first question?
Somewhat.
Okay, thank you.
It seemed to me, Susan, that when you said that you were going to take over as the administrator to give the administrator's report at the telecom board, that that's really equal to taking over what seemed to me to be an independent channel that was away from politics.
I would have to respectfully disagree with that. The cable administrator position is the director of the cable administration division, which I supervise. The employee was no longer, there was nobody an employee in that position. There was nobody at the government channel that expressed any interest in taking up the duty of serving on the telecom board. So I'm not sure how a supervisor usurps a subordinate position's duties. I'm not sure that's possible.
Could I add something to that too? The recommendation that forums be shown on the public access station, not to be stopped, but to be shown on the public access as opposed to government, was expressly to remove any possibility of politics being shown on the government channel. My concern on there is that I think the government channel should be showing the government in action, gavel-to-gavel coverage of the meetings, not only of this board, but all the important committees in the city. But when it comes to advocacy or politics or promotion, that really shouldn't be on the government channel. That should be on our public access channel. And the difficulty I had when I was talking with Susan about this was trying to figure out, could I come up with some definition that would meet constitutional standards and challenge before a court to have some sort of forum that would not go over into the area of advocacy or promotion or politics. And I didn't think I could really come up with a definition like that, because when you're having a discussion amongst people in a round table, then people are going to say what they think. And who is going to be the moderator to say, wait a minute, oh, I'm the czar, I'm the idea czar, and now you're getting into advocacy, so I'm not letting you talk anymore. That, to me, is a situation that we should not get into, especially when we have a public access channel where is our free speech channel that anybody can get involved in. So that is to keep politics away from the government channel. Is why I thought it made more sense to have the freewheeling public affairs sorts of forums to be shown on the public access channel, which is what I thought that it was designed for. I thought the government channel was designed for the government coverage, but not just a freewheeling sort of public forum.
Well, I think an argument could be made that that the City Council is a forum.
We do have actually a limited public forum here. We allow comments, but the comments must be based and directed toward the agenda item. So that's okay. That will meet constitutional muster. I'm not concerned about that going into court, because it is not an unlimited public forum. It is limited right to the agenda items that are before the council. And so we have created a limited public forum in this room for that, but that's fine, and I think that's certainly defendable.
Okay, well, I'll come back to that because I'm not a lawyer and don't even play one on TV here, but who's in charge?
Who's in charge?
Who's in charge of?
Of the government channel.
Right now, Rick Delahousse is sort of, his job is, Rick, the guy that sits at the front desk, Rick?
Yes.
When you go down there, he is in charge of the administrative day-to-day stuff, the scheduling, the making sure these guys are here to film the meetings, the programming, developing the schedule, running the operation.
He's been down there for how long?
Quite some time. I don't know exactly how long.
At least 8 years.
A long time.
Well, it just seems to me that if we shut down these kinds of discussions on the government channel, that we're shutting down our opportunities to have different perspectives and ideas, and I think an argument can be made that we're doing that same sort of thing on the government channel now with the gavel to gavel idea. For example, when the council and people were speaking for the tax of a couple of years ago, the 4444 vote, should there have been a disclaimer for that? Was that illegal?
I think that should be a limit on how much promotion would be going on, even at a city council meeting. You certainly have to decide whether or not you're going to vote for a tax and to discuss the issues about that, and so that is clearly proper to do. On the other hand, I do think that the City Council should, during a regular meeting, refrain from being cheerleaders and say, everybody out there needs to go out and vote for the tax. I think that's probably somewhere I'd like you not to do that.
Do you think we did that?
I don't remember that happening at one of the meetings, but I got to tell you.
No, I'm talking on the government channel, though. There were promotions for the. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't have been. I'm just saying that there were.
There was one kind of press conference-like thing that I saw that Mr. Bemis had saved and put on Google, and so I don't get the government channel, so I didn't see it before, but I saw it then, and everybody had T-shirts on for Fayetteville, and if I had been asked about that ahead of time, I would have recommended that not be on the government channel, that should have been on public access or just on a commercial station, and that would be my recommendation in the future. I'd like to see all advocacy and a promotion like that not on the government channel. Although I will say that I'm a little more lenient than Catherine Sherrills, who's the university professor that wants to have all of that off. I think we could still have debates, electoral debates on the government channel, because I think that that can be done in a way that will meet the constitutional requirements, that we don't have any discretion on what's being shown. In other words, I could write the rules that would say that if you're a candidate that is filed for election or re-election, that prior to the election, during that period of time, after the filing date and up to the election, that there can be debates handled by a, quote, nonpartisan group like the League of Women Voters on the government channel. And that is a narrowly drawn definition. There's no discretion. In other words, the government doesn't get to say who's on and who's not. It's just whoever is a candidate. So I think that would pass the free speech constitutional muster, and we could still have that on the government channel. My problem is that when we get into public forums, that it's very, I don't know how to define them in such a way that the courts will say that we're not exercising our discretion to determine whose viewpoint gets expressed.
Well, why did that change, Kit? I mean, why is that a concern now and it wasn't a year ago?
Well, frankly, I didn't realize, I guess, that all this was going on. I had actually participated in roundtables. I guess I assumed that they were going to be shown on public access. But now, when it was brought up, they requested this forum on forum, and I got educated when I participated in the forum on forum, and found out about what was going on and realized that we were in fact creating a public forum on the government channel. And you can do that if you want to. You certainly can do that. It's not earth-shaking. The sky's not going to fall. The world's not going to end if we continue to have forums on the government channel. It's a policy decision that you can make. But what I want you to know is that we really will have real difficulty limiting what these forums are going to be. And there might be viewpoints that you don't want to hear. It might not be on kind of issues you want to hear, and the government can't be in the issue censorship business. So if we allow that, then be prepared for whatever somebody might ask to be shown there. The second thing is there will need to be money appropriated for the government channel to continue to do this, and there will be a limited number of public forums that they could finance. My recommendation to Susan, if that's your choice, then it's a first come, first serve. You do it at the first of the year and everybody get in line, and once the first 6 have been financed, and there won't be any more the rest of the year unless you want to do a budget adjustment. So that, but it can be done. And the public forums that have been in the past, I don't have a problem with any one of them. I sat on one with some cell phone companies, and I thought that was interesting. I don't have any problem with what's been shown on there now. And maybe things won't change. I don't know. But as just from my perspective, I wanted to bring this to your attention, that the government channel was basically designed to educate our citizens, to give them a clear view of their government in action, rather than something that might really not have much to do with the government.
I would also like to add to the question of why it's just now coming up. It's just now reaching this level of an agenda. It's just now reaching your agenda. It's not a new debate. It's not a new issue. The conversation has been had multiple times over the years. Some of you have been involved in those conversations. And this particular conversation started 3 years ago this month, when the Telecom Board developed a policy subcommittee to look at a new government channel policy, and from that was born the Policy and Procedures Subcommittee. So it didn't just come up. It's not a new issue. There are this many meetings that have been had just on policy and procedures. So it's not new, not a new issue.
Mr. Mayor, if I remember my dates right, in 2000 there was a city council debate on this issue, and in 2003, and I think I said 3 years ago this started again, and here we are in 2008, so this has been going on.
Well, and I've got
and I'm sure it was going on before 2000.
from 2000 an article, and I brought copies for you all because it might as well have been in today's paper. Pass those around. It was funny going back and reading all the history, all the articles from the last 8 to 10 years. A lot of it they're the exact same questions They're the exact same issues, and for whatever reason, the matter hasn't been resolved. And I think the matter hasn't been resolved for some of the reasons that Kit was just talking about, is that we keep trying to create a limited, open forum, and you just can't do that. And the model that I'm recommending and that Kit's recommending is actually the strictest model. Well, Professor Sherrills would be a little more strict than what Kit's proposing, but it's the strictest model that you can have for programming that would limit the potential for partisan influence, political influence for anybody. You know, one thing to keep in mind is that just because a board is appointed, it doesn't mean they don't have an agenda. And that's true for every board and commission across the city. You all appoint those individuals to serve. They have an ordinance that dictates what they do. Planning Commission has their rules. But it doesn't mean that they're going to be impartial. It doesn't mean they're going to not have an agenda. And somebody's going to have to be making decisions on what are we going to show, what are we not going to show, who's going to participate, who's not going to participate. Who gets to make those decisions? The mayor, me, the cable administrator, the telecom board as a whole? Who gets to make those decisions? Who is fair enough? Who is impartial enough to make those decisions? Based on what I've read, I don't think that many people would be happy with anybody that you put in that position. And the person who gets put in that position is probably not going to be happy about it either.
Well, let me just run on down my
Sure, go ahead.
questions here, and then hopefully some other council members would like to comment, and people in the audience. One thing I wondered about was, since I was the one that requested that roundtable about the school location, I thought it was unusual that I didn't find out about it from staff. I found out about it from another email, and that seemed, I don't know, does the staff trump the council's opinion on what's to be on the, I didn't understand why I wasn't informed.
That was a mistake, and you should have been informed. The decision was made very shortly after the forum to do that. There were a lot of other things going on that week in relation to the PEG Center and the administration of that center. There were other things happening, and I will take responsibility for that. That fell through the cracks, and you should have absolutely been notified first as the requester of the programming.
Okay. What percentage would you say of the current programming is devoted to forums before it got shut down?
Again, I want to reiterate that no one is suggesting that we not do the forums. It's what channel the forums are on. So I don't think it's fair to characterize as shutting them down.
On the government channel.
They just won't be, we're not proposing they be shown on the government channel anymore. It's limited. I think if you read Marcia Melanchek's article in the paper, it listed some of the forums. I've got a list of the forums over the last 2 years. The candidate forum, the number of those is lengthy, and that's just during election season, and you'll see those a lot, and they get played a lot for good reason. But as far as the issue forums go, I've got the list.
That's okay.
Okay.
Okay. Then who's going to determine what it is we're going to learn in the rest of the programming on there? I've been watching it a lot lately, and I've seen, and I like the Cape Brothers, but I've seen them play a whole lot out at Gully Park, and I saw the dedication of the courthouse 3 or 4 times, and who's going to decide?
That's an important question, and that's one of the issues, one of the things that I've had a problem with. Of how are these decisions being made? Who's deciding? Who's deciding to put a 1992 Gully Park concert on the channel?
Well, shouldn't it be that the telecom board just submits a policy?
It should be so clearly articulated and outlined of what is allowed and what is not allowed that there's no question and there's no decision to be made. There's no, well, maybe we should show this or maybe we shouldn't, or maybe this is a good program or maybe there isn't. You know, and there should be some procedure things put in place that says, okay, we're not going to show a 15-year-old Gully Park concert. Or the university concerts. Should we even be showing university, the symphony and the other musical events from the university? I don't think that we should. I don't think that those programs should be on there, but for whatever reason, they were being programmed. That was one of the issues that I had a problem with. And I couldn't get a clear explanation on what was the philosophy behind how we did the programming. And I think that's an important thing to answer, but I think there shouldn't be a lot of room for creativity in there. It should be clearly spelled out.
I think we need some absolute definitions.
I couldn't agree with you more. The concerns that people have voiced over the last few weeks about political influence and manipulation and controlling the channel are legitimate concerns, which is why you want the strictest model of programming in place for the government channel, which is not what we're doing right now.
Maybe we need to look at a subcommittee, but you didn't answer my question about shouldn't the telecom board just submit a policy?
I think the telecom board it'd be completely within their purview to recommend a policy to this council on how to run the programming. And I think that probably is the more appropriate avenue to go.
Okay, I'll stop for now and let somebody else say something.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I just want to follow up on some questions that were asked. Well, maybe I just want to respond to some of your questions and my reaction to them. You know, one of your last questions related to how many, showing these old things and things that have been taped. One of the complaints I hear from people is that they don't get enough repeats of the, basically the government, the city council meetings, the committee meetings. A lot of people aren't, necessarily, they work during the times that they're shown. They can't catch one. So, they're asking a lot of times requests for copies of them and so forth. So I feel like that if you fill that up with government meetings, even if they were repetitive, following the meetings, I think that would be a good thing, because I've heard people complain about that they have to tape them so they can watch them or whatever, because they're not shown frequently enough as a follow-up. And instead, there's this other stuff that could be shown on the public access. And I might as well jump into this, because I've always been a huge proponent of public access for years and years. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with Catherine or the city attorney about candidate forums. However, whenever I was president of the local League of Women Voters, and Richard was involved back then, we did the forums through public access, CAT. Marion Orton was a big instigator in that, because she wanted to promote CAT and to get producers, down there. And so we always had, 5 or 6 kind of reluctant league members becoming producers, just so they could, produce. We had to do it all. But it was great fun. And we did that for many years. So I guess there's a lot to be said about, the candidate forums. I'm not going to really get into that. I don't have a real opinion, other than it did enable more people to be producers. And this certainly holds true with the forums. I support forums that, I would not be opposed to forums being on the government station if they were strictly city government issues. But I do have a problem. For example, we have ward meetings. Of course, that's not really a forum, but we have ward meetings taped, or, something like that. That is strictly a city issue. And my problem is going beyond what is really a city issue on the government station, because it dilutes the public access, the CAT. And, they're always struggling to get, continue their volume of productions and producers. And I just feel like there is a forum for that. And I think the public feel like that the government station should relate only to city government. And I think there's a very big issue, which I think either the city attorney or Susan brought up, and that's the city resources. I mean, because as long as you have individuals being producers for CAT, a certain amount of the cost of producing whatever forums, or that's being bared by the public that is interested in producing that and seeing that forum or that whatever. But if everything was allowed on the government station, then it would just overwhelm the city resources, and they would have to be, like the city attorney said, just basically limited. Just take a number. There's so many that we can do per year, and so I don't know. I guess that's about all for now.
All right, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Brenda, I think you're right that there's a huge opportunity for CAT here to create more relevant, salient, legitimate programming, and not that the independent shows are not legitimate, but government, I think that I probably shouldn't have used that word. Sorry, producers. I love you guys.
You're going to get another nickname.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to have more names. My skin's thickened up over the last couple of weeks. But it is an opportunity for them to expand their programming and expand what they do. And I think that they are enthusiastic about that opportunity. The other thing is that, there's the argument that, well, the number of forums and the resources has never been an issue before. Well, there are a number of forums lingering. Another reason why this has recently been brought to a head, there's a list of forums out there, and the Forum on Forums was the first of many that were going to be initiated because there's a handful of citizens that are not satisfied with progress that's been made on the policy and procedures. They're not satisfied with what's happening, so they're initiating the forums on their own. So it is going to become more of a problem as more and more of these are requested. I would also argue that this discussion tonight will prompt even more requests for forums. Once it's understood that it's an open forum, my guess is that I'm going to open my email tomorrow to lists and lists and lists of requests, and they're actually already coming in, just from the dialogue in the last 2 weeks in the newspapers. So that is a true concern. And again, who decides? Who decides which ones get shown, which ones we do, how we spend our resources?
All right. Did you have any other questions?
I'd like to hear
Any
from
other
him.
council people? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I got a couple. My concern in all of this is basically, Susan, the telecom board, their responsibility. From what I have, and I sit on one of these committees several years ago, and it was quite a hoot. But at the end of the day, we basically decided that the telecom board was going to make recommendations. And what this council did not approve of could be appealed to the council, much like the planning commission does.
Well, actually, they're making recommendations and you make the decision.
Yeah, and it seems to me that they're out of the loop right now, this whole thing. Is that the case? Are they, where is the telecom board in all this, Susan, is what I'm asking.
I don't think they're out of the loop at all.
Okay.
Out of the loop on what, specifically?
It seems like the discussion that they would make a recommendation to this council. What is the recommendation of the telecom?
What is the question?
What do they see as this forum issue?
You would have to ask them. My issue is that the policy outlines limited public forums. Limited public forums was defined by the city attorney and others on April 30th, and it was clear that what we were doing was outside of the government channel policy, which was brought to you by the telecom board and approved by the council. They were not outside of that loop. I'm likely not going to go request permission from a board to stop breaking policy. I'm going to go ahead and stop doing that as soon as I know that we're doing it.
So they were kept in the loop that we were breaking policy?
I think that that was part of the discussion on April 30th. I mean, the question even came up during the forum, is what we're doing okay? Is this very forum that we're having okay? I mean, that was when the discussion, that's when it was happening. That's when those decisions were made.
I do think, though, the Telecommunications Board could certainly study this issue and recommend to you for your final decision on what's best to do, and that surely would not be out of line.
That's all I'm saying.
They have a right to do that.
That's all I'm saying.
Not only would it not be out of line, it would be the totally appropriate thing to do.
Yes.
And I understand Susan's point. I mean, she is trying to maintain the policy that board set and we approved.
Right.
And so she shouldn't be damned for doing that. I know you're not damned.
No,
I know you're not.
I'm just trying to get clarification.
Yeah, but I know that. I didn't mean to say it that way. But you know, she's, I think we're premature in this discussion. I think.
I would agree with that.
I would agree with that.
I think that, but one of the reasons, that stack of DVDs right there is one of the reasons that we're probably here tonight. That just a decision was not made. There's been 3 years of discussion about it. The subcommittee made a list of recommendations. Progress was not being made on that. Citizens started initiating forums because they weren't happy about it, and here we are tonight having this discussion. I mean, that's what happened.
But a decision was made. You made the decision to enforce the policy.
From an administrative standpoint,
right.
Yes.
Which now, all the good citizens of Fayetteville that have a dog in this fight, or they have an opinion, they can talk to to the telecom board. Telecom board. Choose on that, and then
makes
gives
a
us a new
recommendation. Yeah, that's the only thing I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Mayor, can I make one? You may.
I just,
Please.
Robert, you used a word a second ago that's kind of,
We'll pull the microphone down to you, please.
it's kind of, you said policy. And when I read through this, I see, and I think this may be part of where we need to clear some stuff up about the role of an advisory board or a policy-making board. I notice it says the city council must also clarify the role of the telecommunications board. If they are truly an advisory board, a change in the language of the ordinance is required. I think that's something that we have to look at. If they're an advisory board, then just like Lionel, you said, they would come to us with their advice, and then the council would set the policy.
And it's sort of like, and I don't know if the Planning Commission is a good example, but they will make recommendations on developments and things like that, and this council will decide whether those qualify, or we don't agree with them, we do agree with them, we pass them, we don't pass them, we appeal their decisions if we don't like it. And the only thing I'm saying is, I don't want to get in a situation where we have moved beyond the group that's supposed to be making the recommendations. That's all I'm saying.
One more thing, Mayor. Kit, in one of your memos, you said, I believe I could draft constitutional provisions that would authorize mayoral and city council election debates moderated by nonpartisan groups such as the League of Women Voters. I could also draft provisions for similar debates with equal time for both sides when an ordinance has been initiated or referred to the voters. Both of these could be shown on Government Channel without creating a, quote, public forum, unquote, which prevents content on viewpoint limitations. You know, I kind of like that idea. I mean, I don't know what the rest of the council does, but I mean, you know, when we've got elections going on among, aldermen, mayor, whatever it is, I think that's something that's germane, and I would be an advocate if you felt comfortable and you could word something like that when we finally come down to this.
One question I would have is where it says where both sides are equally represented, who chooses who's for which side? How does that work?
You know, they've done that in the past, I think, Mayor, and like on the impact fees, and normally you'll have two sides on that issue, and they'll choose their own representatives. So I think that we can work with that.
Okay.
It needs to be moderated by a nonpartisan group like the League of Women Voters or some other nonpartisan group. It doesn't have to be the League. But I think I can draft language that these courts would say is constitutional and doesn't infringe on anybody's First Amendment rights, because it will take our discretion away, because we're not supposed to have any discretion on what to decide. Right. But by just saying whoever is the candidate during these debates, well, they get to debate. And if you're not a candidate, you can't debate. And then on the initiated acts or the referendum, then we'd let the two sides. There'll be a side for it and a side against it, and we'll let them choose their own representatives. So I think that the courts would think that that is reasonable. They'll allow us to do that.
Okay, thanks. Yes, ma'am.
Are we interested in determining whether it's an advisory board or whether they act on their own? Or
Kit, you might want to refer to the memo you issued this afternoon.
What's that?
I do think that they are, unfortunately, I put it in your box. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it. It's pretty brief. But there has been some issue about the extent of duties that have been placed on the telecoms board by the ordinance that you passed, section 33.210B of your Code of Fayetteville. And this was the ordinance that was drafted by your ad hoc group, Lionel, when you and Don Marr struggled for months, I think, trying to come up with a good ordinance. And subsection A of that says the Telecommunications Board shall advise the City Council and make recommendations on telecommunication issues. Then subsection B says, further, the Telecommunications Board shall have the following duties and responsibilities. And the first two, I think, are the ones that are a little bit confusing. The first one says, oversee the administration of the city's PEG facility. And the second says, oversee the administration of any cable television channels. There has been some concern that oversee the administration could mean that the ordinance was intended to give the Telecom Board supervisory authority over city employees. Now, as I've tried to explain earlier, the mayor is empowered to supervise city employees. Thus, the City Council is without legal power to give itself or another board the supervisory authority over employees. Now, when you look at this ordinance and you try to interpret it, there's some basic rules of interpretation that our Supreme Court has told us about. One of them is, quote, we will give the words in the statute or ordinance their ordinary and common usage. So I looked up oversee in the Merriam-Webster Collegiate Dictionary that I have in my office, 10th edition, 2001 edition. The first definition, the most common usage, in other words, in the dictionary was for oversee was, quote, survey, watch. The second definition was inspect, examine. The third and last, which is the least common usage, was supervise. Thus, the most basic rule of ordinance interpretation of oversee would be to survey or watch, possibly inspect or examine, but not necessarily supervise. Now, another rule of ordinance construction or interpretation is that the law or the ordinance must be interpreted so as to make it legal or constitutional if that is possible. The statutes, the Arkansas Code annotated under 1443-504 mayor states under A, the mayor of the city shall be its chief executive officer. And under B, it says the mayor shall, 1, supervise the conduct of all officers of the city. Since the mayor is statutorily empowered to supervise all city employees, an ordinance granting the Telecom Board the powers to oversee the administration cannot legally mean to grant any supervisory powers because the statutes have already granted that to the mayor. Instead, oversee must be interpreted as its primary customary meaning to watch or inspect the administration of the PEG facility. So that's what oversee the facility means, is to watch or inspect it. This would help the board fulfill its primary purpose, which is stated right at the very start of the ordinance, quote, to advise the City Council on telecommunication issues. So I think that it is clear that they are an advisory board. The statute, the ordinance makes them an advisory board. It doesn't give them powers to supervise city employees. It could not do that legally. And so they are they are an advisory board that makes recommendations to you, and frankly, they've done a good job through the years. I've gone to some of their meetings. They listen to people who have complaints. They intercede and talk to the cable company and try to help the people out. I am a strong advocate of the Telecom Board. I really appreciate them being here, and I think right now would be a good time for them to look at this issue again and maybe give you some quick advice, not 3 years from now, but some quick advice. Take a vote. Sometimes it's hard to do. Sometimes you just got to vote up and down. but to give you some recommendations on this, and then you all can look at it again.
I totally agree. I think that's good advice. I think it needs to go to the telecom board and let them give us their advice on this.
And that was my initial suggestion too, so.
I would recommend that your questions be very specific of what you're asking them to answer.
I'll take care of that end of it.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, and I guess that's my question. What are we asking them to answer?
I think you're specifically looking at the forums.
Yeah.
And do you want to continue, are they going to recommend that the city council fund public forums on the government channel, or should these forums be shown on public access? It's basically one of your, isn't that your major question? Where should the forums be shown? Government channel or public access?
And it might even get into a little more in depth about what type of forms they think needs to be shown, let the telecom board make a recommendation of what they think it might, what they define the forms as.
The devil's always in the detail, though. I can tell you in the First Amendment area of the law, we are limited when we start trying to choose types. The courts don't want to give us very much discretion because they're afraid that we will choose the types we like, the viewpoints we like, and governments can't do that.
Again, if I understand you right, the policy does not really truly allow for forums.
The policy says limited public forums.
Limited.
A very short section.
So what are we, again, what are we asking?
I guess you're asking if they're going to recommend a change in the policy.
That's what I think we're asking.
Yes.
We have a
Okay.
policy
And I'm not-
already.
We already have a policy, and I don't know if I really necessarily want to change the policy. It's
Me
been
either. I mean, but
discussed.
I would like to hear from the telecom board and see what their opinion is on that too.
Okay.
It may be very possible to have that discussion right now.
It's what?
It may be very possible to have that discussion
Okay.
tonight. I don't know that additional
We have to
subcommittee meetings and additional
Let's go.
years' worth of conversation is the most effective approach. So, and I think there's a lot of people here that have things that they'd like to say. So I'm going to, if there's no other questions for me,
Do we have any other
Directly.
questions for Susan right now?
Not now, I'd like to
you
hear
can
from the fellow.
yank me back up here when you need me.
All right, Mr. Drake, are you the chair of the telecom board now? Sure. Come on up. How are you this evening?
How you all doing? I'm Richard Drake, Chair of the Telecom Board. I've been on the Policies and Procedures Committee for a long time. Actually, it seems like for about 20 years. I feel like we've been building a racing car for about 2 years, and then one of my neighbors came and just kind of blew it up. We've been discussing a lot of things over the last 2 years. We've been talking about how many people can request a forum, maybe if something was an advocacy program, one program in particular. One of the things we've never discussed is not to have forums on the government channel. So I just want to make a point before we start, though, that whatever we talk about tonight, it really ought to go back to the telecom board to talk about. I mean, we shouldn't be making any decisions here tonight because I don't want to diss the telecom board, and I'm not going to stand here and say, yeah, let's make a decision tonight. I don't think you should
I
either.
think everyone agrees with that perspective.
I think anybody watching at home right now is going to start thinking, especially if they're not familiar with what's going on, they're going to start thinking about issue forums. And they're going to start thinking, gee, has anybody gone down to the government channel and just requested forums on anything? Oh my God. Either, hey, that's so cool, or my God, what a terrible waste of government resources, you know? But we know a lot of we know just from our own personal experiences the last 2 years that these issue forums have been 100% devoted to government, what has been pertinent to government in Fayetteville. And we know, I know for a fact, dealing with these forums, because I've been on a number of the forums and roundtables even before I got on the before I got on the telecom board, that they were only done in terms of resources, that they had to be done in terms of government meetings and other programs took priority before the issue forums. So it's not like you had an issue forum and then suddenly the city council or subcommittee meeting, well, they couldn't get filmed because there was an issue forum and you had to take camera people for the issue forum. That just never happened. So it's not like the issue forum took precedence. It's not like anybody at the cable administration was saying, oh, hey, sorry guys, you're kind of screwed because we got this issue forum and that's more important than your government meeting. So as far as resources were concerned, the issue forums are pretty much on the bottom of the totem pole. So I think we've seen this in the newspaper, so I'm not going to go down the list of what meetings we've had. I think a lot of us here have been on the government forums. A lot of us have been on the roundtables, so we know that these are forums and roundtables that are pertinent to Fayetteville. I've been involved with CAT, with public access since 1991, and if they were moved to public access, and I'm going to tell you that they could be done well. The CAT producers could do them well, because I saw them done well on Fayetteville Open Channel in the early 90s. I've seen them done well on Access for Fayetteville. I've seen them done well on CAT. I know the staff could do a good job at CAT if they were contract productions. I know that if someone came in and did a long take on CAT, like one of you could go down to CAT and say, I'd like a long take. You could go in once a year and request a long take, and you could do a contract, seemed like a contract production at CAT for a long take, a free production once a year, and the staff would do a production for you. The only caveat there is that, again, it can be one-sided. Now we talk about how on the government channel all sides had to be presented. That doesn't mean all sides in the universe. It meant that all pertinent sides that you could find in a discussion. So you didn't have to go out and find the Rosicrucians or the Knights of Columbus to sit on your round table. You had to find everybody with a pertinent point of view to sit on your round table or your issue forum or your luau or whatever you were calling it any particular week, and you had to get them there. And if you couldn't have them there, you really couldn't have it really wasn't worth having a round table. So CAT could do them well. The only caveat is you don't have to have all sides presented. And I just want to say, if they were on CAT, they would look as professional as they do on the government channel. When we make policy, and policy is a long and arduous procedure, and I hate, and sometimes when I go to policy and procedure meetings, I wish I was getting my wisdom teeth taken out, and because I hate it. I hated it when I was on the CAT board. I hated it when I was any board I've been on. I've always hated policy and procedure because it takes a lot out of you. But we don't make policy and procedure for us. We don't make policy and procedure. When we make policy and procedure, we don't assume Mr. Cootie is mayor. We don't assume Ms. Allen is an alderman. We don't assume that Mr. Williams is the attorney. We make policy and procedure for the people who follow you. We make policy and procedure for people 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road. Basically, we make policy and procedure for people who may be a bunch of uneducated yahoos who may sit in your seat several years down the road. And so we make policies and procedures to protect the interests of the people of Fayetteville. We set up a solid wall around the rights, around the government channel, around the rights of everybody, so those uneducated yahoos are sitting in your seats 15 years from now can't come on like the hordes outside the city of Rome and just dismantle it and say, well, our intentions are good. And it just seems like a really good idea at the time, because it's like, sometimes in this discussion, I feel like Cassandra just before the Battle of Troy. And I'm saying, don't let that horse in the city, because it looks real pretty, man, but there's people inside it that you don't want in your city. And I think that everybody has the best of intentions here, but I think we're opening the door to something that is real dangerous for us. And I think the reason our policies and procedures meetings are so fractious and so long, because we are creating important policy and procedure. And I think that we have to keep the telecom board in the loop and keep the telecom board strong so that we're creating policies for the people who come after you, to protect the people of Fayetteville who come after you, because we are protecting the future people in Fayetteville. That's pretty much all I want to say at first. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions from Mr. Drake? Thank you, Richard.
All right, thanks very much.
Anyone else like to address us tonight? Catherine?
Hi, I'm Catherine Sherrills. I teach media law at the university, and I was at one time manager of Fayetteville Open Channel, and at one time chairman of the cable board. So I've been around during many of those discussions. Mainly, I wanted to come down here and kind of express support for Kit because I feel like I helped get him in this mess. I was on that last forum on forums, and during which the subject was, I understood the subject to be, are these issue forums appropriate for the government channel? And that may have just been my take, but I have been ringing that bell for many years, although I have participated in the forums, I don't deny that, because I think they're great. I think the forums are terrific. I just don't think they belong on the government channel. But I don't, one of my main problems is I don't understand what the problem is with putting them on a public channel, on the public access channel. It's there. It's there for the reason for people to express their opinions, and so I think that's what these forums are, and that's why they ought to be there. The one argument that I've heard and read since this came up most recently is that on the public access channel there is no requirement that both sides or all sides be represented, whereas there is on the government channel. Having known and loved Fayetteville people for 25 years now, 30 years I guess it is, I don't think there is any panel of 5 or 6 people that would ever tell all Fayetteville people that this is balanced. We are very strong in our opinions. We have strong opinions. We're well informed, and we have our feelings about things. And I would think that anyone watching practically any panel that that someone has put together is going to find something wrong with it. And that's the kind of voice I don't think ought to be on the government channel. I think the government channel ought to be the voice of the government. And I mean, that makes me some kind of horrible conservative person, I think. A strict person, I guess it is. But I mean, I think that's what the government channel is for. And government channels in the PEG system are very, very different under the law than the educational and government channels are very different than the public channel. The public channel, the government cannot have any say in the content. On the government channel, it can have a say in the content, but if you go over that line of government programming, I think you open yourself up as a public forum, like the public access channel, which is what Kit was saying. And I agree with Richard about that the forums that I've seen on the government channel certainly have been pertinent to Fayetteville. But in the future, this future that he's worried about, and we should all be worried about, who's going to decide what's pertinent? I mean, pertinent itself is a word that can be twisted, and let's say that down the road, Fayetteville passes an ordinance against trans fats, okay? And you know, you've been through the smoking ban, you know that trans fat ban wouldn't be any fun either. Maybe somebody will think that the person who loves trans fats, that's not pertinent. And who is going to be that person to make that decision? So that's what it comes down to. When you're talking about government, when you're talking about the government voice, who is going to be the person to make that decision? And I think that's something you can avoid because you have a nationally acclaimed public access channel. If you didn't, it'd be a whole different question. But you do. And I just don't see any reason why these programs aren't on aren't on public access.
Thank you, Catherine. Any questions from Dr. Sherrills? Thank you. How's our invertebrate biologist this evening?
I'm Louise Kramer, and I've got 25 years on the good woman who preceded me. I think this was by far the best part of the evening. I wish it had more people here because I love what you guys are talking about, and I think it's serious and responsible. I certainly don't agree with all of it. I happen to love my country and my Bill of Rights and my Constitution, and am worried about proscriptions being superimposed. And I think that's one of the things that's been great about this discussion and the wonderful questions members of the council have asked and so on, and God bless you and more power to you. One of the things that I worry about as just a regular citizen is I think the press on this matter has been lousy, and it has made people I like and respect look not too heads up. And so I'm interested in the whole discussion being elevated, and I think some of the proposals that have been made tonight will help it a lot to make the discussion at a different plane and done by experienced and responsible people who have the good of the entire community at heart. And more power to you.
Thanks, Louise.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to address this? Hey, Jim.
Jim Bemis. I want to thank y'all for listening to me again, as you have over the last 10 years, discussing the same item as Ms. Thomas has said. Repeatedly on the telecom board, in various committees, before you all, subcommittees, we've discussed the same items and nothing happened. That's the reason the 7 citizens requested the forum on forums. I agree with Ms. Thomas. We need to discuss that, but I'm embarrassed that we're here tonight, not at the behest of the Telecommunications Board, but through some process I still don't understand. Why are we here tonight when the Telecom Board was not involved in making an advisory decision? You may have seen the paper that I was going to ask you tonight to form again the same sort of subcommittee that you did in 2003. We had representatives of the Telecom Board, we had representatives of the council, we had representatives of the city administration, we had the city attorney's office, we had this broad group that we just heard discuss. How do we elevate the discussion here? That's what I'd like to see you do. I don't think we're going to make any headway tonight talking about individual comments. Mr. Williams prefaced his remarks to you all by saying it's not a legal or constitutional problem. We're dealing in the area of opinion. And my opinion is just as good as anybody here. And I'm going to say again tonight, and I hope you will discuss it, anything any council member says is city business is city business. That's the way that's my opinion. And I'd like to see that discussed. And I do hope you will consider the subcommittee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Anyone else? Hello, Marvin.
Good evening. I'm Marvin Hilton. I've been a citizen of Fayetteville for 16 years. I was a cable administrator for 13. And one of all the things that were said here, I could say a lot, but I think the most important thing I can say is that I think there's not really a problem with the forums being on the government channel. They've comprised a very small part of the programming. We have not really spent that much time producing forums because there haven't been that many. I think the real problem is probably voter apathy, because the forum that we did on impact fees, you may have remember after that, only 11.2% of the citizens voted on that issue. And it failed by 1 vote?
It was a tie.
Or was it? I think later on, somebody, I don't remember.
First it won by 1 vote, but then an overseas ballot came in and it was a tie, and in order to pass, it had to have 1 extra vote. So it was a tie, so
it was close, and only 11% of the people voted.
It was 2015 to 2015.
Yeah. And if you look closely at the ordinance that created the telecom board and the policy, you will see that it calls for such things as issue forums. it actually mentions that in the policy, well, let's see. Yeah, in the policy it says should provide information about issues facing the local government. And there's been a clause in the policy since 1992. That's when the government channel started. And I personally cannot remember any citizen complaining about a forum. There have been no complaints. Also, forums are very common on government channels across the country. It's not unusual at all. The beginning of a lot of the government channel policies will say something about you cannot advocate any cause, candidate, or viewpoint. But following that, it will say you can have issue forums that are balanced. And that's a very common policy. Also, I'd like to say something about, I think there have been more problems with keeping informational programs nonpartisan than there have been problems with the forums. Sometimes partisan themes creep into the informational programs. And I think sometimes the First Amendment is violated with the informational programs because occasionally, not too often, you have religious elements that appear. And sometimes I've wondered, boy, maybe I should edit that out of the program because, you know, we're not supposed to be doing that, I don't think. And a good example of that is, I believe it was around 1998, I was over in my office and someone from City Hall called me and they were kind of in a panic. He said, Marvin, can you come over really quick in 5 minutes? We have some really important guests in the city council room. We'd like for you to record it. So I grabbed all of my equipment and I got over here. And as I was setting the equipment up, I was a little bit worried because I kind of wondered about the content of the program. Maybe it wouldn't be appropriate. But since the guests were from out of town, I didn't want to, start discussing this. I thought it'd be kind of impolite. So I went ahead and recorded the program. And it turned out to be a really beautiful program featuring the Zambian a cappella choir singing hymns right here in this room. So it is a good program, but it's one of those few programs that has nothing to do with government. It was a choir from Africa singing hymns in our city council room. But anyway, just some comments, and unless there are questions, that's all.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Hilton? Thank you.
All right.
Anyone else? Going once, going twice. I'm going to close. Aubrey. Be brief. There's a reason why you're the only one I've said that to tonight.
Yes, there is. And I don't have much to say, but I decided I'd come up here and not miss the opportunity since it's an important subject. I agree with everything said about fairness and complete coverage of meetings. And I love them. I watch them. And I could be the person who watches more than anybody else in town. So I've been on the telecom board now only 5 months, and it is an interesting experience. We haven't made many decisions, so we haven't brought much advice to you guys, which I understand is what we're supposed to do, and I hope we'll do better with that in the future. So I'm perfectly willing to look at these policies that you're talking about. I haven't seen a problem with forums in the past, and I have watched quite a few, but in my mind I can't remember which ones were on CAT now in some cases and which ones were done on Government Channel. But I believe they're important, and I think we ought to be sure we've got a policy that allows the right ones that everybody will agree is government business. That said, I think that the public school decision and the Walton Arts Center things that are very important to the city. It has to do with the way we where we build infrastructure for a new school and how our citizens are accommodated. And the Walton Arts Center has a lot to do with how the future of our city might go in certain respects. So those particular two, I can't imagine that we couldn't find a way to do without considering them beyond the pale. But maybe they're good examples. Maybe those are good ones to talk about, because I haven't seen the list of the ones Susan's been requested to do. It may be pretty off the wall. So, but I agree we need to work on this, and I think the board will, Telecom Board will want to continue that process and give you a decent report of anything that we can suggest. And thank you for listening to this tonight, because it probably was time to talk about the Telecom Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Aubrey. Did you have a question?
Can I, yes, Aubrey?
Yes, ma'am.
Those two issues that you were talking about, would they not be appropriate on the public access?
We discussed this at the last Telecom Board meeting, and we had someone who pointed out that the school board and the University Board of Regents are about to be in a negotiation over property and whether to buy this and whether to move here and these things, and they would be the subject of this. Mm-hmm. And they directly oversee that channel, the educational channel. The university has most of the hours. The high school has a limited number of hours that they are allowed to use. Now, back in the day, we thought the student newspaper, and then by projection, in today's world where we've got electronic media, the student-run media of all kinds, including their internet site and so forth, might be pretty darn independent of influence from the Board of Regents or the school board, and have an advisor or two who might sort of set some limits and guide them in doing the right thing, but they would do a lot of things. But we had a spokesman from the university station who suggested that it wouldn't be possible maybe for them to do it on the educational channel, because both those groups would have a vested interest and possibly not want to share the information of what they're trying to decide, or not want to have it publicly discussed any more than it already is, which is pretty hard to imagine. Yes, ma'am.
Well, you asked about CAT. You didn't say the education channel.
Oh, CAT. I thought you meant the education.
No.
There's no problem having them on CAT, but it's not as simple as having them on Government Channel. You don't have the same audience. Now, I've experienced when we used CAT in the past for some shows about neighborhood issues, that when I go around and tell the neighbors, well, here's the time that the show's going to run on CAT, and some certain people would feel very offended. They didn't even want to hear the word CAT because it had some naughty shows after midnight, and they didn't want them in their house. So they wouldn't watch the neighborhood show at 9 o'clock in the morning because it was on that station. So we deal with a certain prejudice, because not everybody wants to find out what other people want to express when you say they have freedom of speech. They want to limit it more than you and I, and most people, I think, do. But there are those people. So it would be possible, but there is not a system quite the same way to broadcast these public meetings. And so CAT can do it, and as Richard has said and Catherine said, it can be professionally done on CAT. And I don't say that, but I don't have the money to pay them to do one. If I were one of the 7 citizens, maybe 7 of us can get up the money to pay CAT their small fees to broadcast it. So I think if it's government business and there's a forum or a round table, I think it still should be here. But I think we do have to try to come up with policies that everybody here in this room would agree are suitable to separate those things in the meantime.
I'll ask you one quickie.
Yes, sir.
Aubrey, if
you can ask me a quick question, I don't know about a quick answer.
Yeah, a quick answer and a quick response. If CAT can do, don't you think there's a possibility that it would increase the viewership of CAT?
Well, I hope so. I'd like to get rid of that perception, and people just don't tune it in after midnight or whatever.
How'd you like that cat can, if cat can do?
I'm not going to try to repeat what you said, Bobby.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aubrey. Anyone else have any comments for us tonight? Council's recommendation to the Telecom Board is to get together and work up some kind of recommendation for Susan.
Programming models.
Submitting a
Programming model.
policy. And I'd like to also thank the council for allowing me to bring this discussion item forward.
Sure.
And
Obviously it was needed.
yes, and I hope that the Telecom Board will work on developing a policy.
Let me just restate the two questions that I asked you all last week that I had from my perspective, and one was the role and scope and authority of the Telecom Board, whether they have administrative authority to write procedures for implementing policy, or are they an advisory board? And it seems that we have determined tonight the legislative intent of the Telecom Board ordinance is that they are an advisory body.
Yes.
Yes.
Am I clear on that?
Yes.
Do we need to make that in sort of a...
Well, that's what it says, and Kit has his memo on interpreting what oversee means according to Webster. So that question is answered. The second question was determine whether you want the government channel to serve as an open public forum for any and all viewpoints, or if you want the channel to serve as a limited public forum, which would allow for the extremely limited debates that Kit has spelled out. And I think that is the programming channel, or the programming of the channel. That's the question that you're asking of the board to answer?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
But
Yes, ma'am.
until they come back with a solution, can we go with this? Enforce the policy until they come back with some sort of recommendation or
Okay,
something.
and I just want to reiterate from my perspective that I think the forums are great. I think if you look at this list, and I think that the government channel staff has done a fantastic job producing the forums. The value and worthiness of the forums is not the question. It's who produces them, who makes the decisions, who decides what is a pertinent issue. You know, is the Telecom Board your, knight on a white horse shining in, coming to protect the city? Is that the role of that board? Is that the protector that we need? Or do we just need to not worry about who gets to make these decisions? So that is from my perspective what the issue is. And so I hope that the Telecom Board will bring you a recommendation that is acceptable to the full council.
I would like to add to that a little bit. Sometimes I'd like them to talk a little bit about the content in general, and whether something could be interpreted as propaganda or just kind of what, not to be just specific to the forums.
Well, and I will also say, as the supervisor of that division, that if we go with the recommendation of what the city attorney and I have presented, that it is my intent to not have something like the rally press conference shown on the government channel. It is my intention to not have anything that looks like, smells like, tastes like partisan politics or promoting of an issue.
Oh, I think that's very important.
I think it's important too. I think that the administration, that's the mayor and I, in the last couple of weeks have been characterized as trying to come in and control the content, when in reality what my perspective is, and I believe what the mayor's perspective is to not have us making those decisions. That, in my opinion, is the best way to handle the situation. So I think the Telecom Board is probably clear on what you're asking of them, and I hope that they will come to a quick resolution for you.
Do we need to put some time frame on it, since this
I
is
think it's
been a
probably not a
problem?
bad idea. How long do you think would be reasonable, Susan?
Well, the Telecom Board officially meets once a month. They are given the authority in the ordinance to meet as often as they need to, and they will need to meet probably, Mr. Drake could probably answer this question for you, but I suspect that what they will do is have a meeting, decide how to proceed, And what I would recommend is let them have that first meeting and set their timeline of how long they think they need to make the decision, and then we'll just get an email back to the council on what you should expect.
All right, Richard, do you think, what's a reasonable time frame, do you think? Just reasonable time frame.
Well, we'll meet in June, and this is not really that complicated an issue. I would think we could have a decision for you. I mean, don't write this down in stone, okay?
We'll treat it like
treat it like most things I say, you know? My guess is we might have something for you by August. August is that gives us 2 months. That would give a committee from the telecom board 2 months to work on something.
All right, that sounds great.
Okay.
Thanks, Richard.
All right, thank you.
I have a
Yes,
quick
ma'am.
question and clarification for what Susan said. Sorry, Robert.
Oh, I was stretching my legs.
Okay.
Okay. I hang in every line.
Well, actually, I think I just lost my
I'm
so tired.
Go ahead and adjourn, right?
There you go.
Hey, all right.
Sorry.
Are we finished up here?
Yeah.
Susan, one thing I want to say is that there have been some pretty personal and virulent negative attacks in the newspaper, and all you've been doing is looking out for the public's best interest here, and a lot of us appreciate that. And I haven't seen such a personal attack in a long, long time, and it's hard to take, but we appreciate you. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
All right, anything else? Meeting adjourned.
I'll probably think of that question.